מסכת Bava Metzia, page 31. We'll start with the Mishnah on page 30b. The core subject of international maritime salvage law, meaning trace situation, someone lost his boat, can be a poor, stormy weather, can be a poor maintenance, can be other reason all of a sudden the boat's out there. So here I'm reading the just general international laws that said the law of salvage is a principle of maritime law whereby any person who helps recover another person's ship or cargo in peril at sea is entitled to a reward commensurate with the value of the property salved. So what you see here, a situation that a fellow can own a boat and all of a sudden it was a tornado, stormy weather, hurricane, or even a issue of a dock, poor maintenance or other issues, and another fellow discovered it. So obviously it depends on the situation, such as if it was an anchor or it was other source of fish, the basic intent of keeping the property and more. But overall, the concept is a concept that have a lot of applications to our lives. Not just that, the subject of a lost item, which is the core subject we discussed in the past several dapim, is a subject that can be involved in things that you never even thought about. So it's a situation a person makes an hour, let's say $100, and now is a lost item, and he is occupied with that lost item, and it's the value that he will be compensated will be $20 or $30 an hour. The question is how far a person needs to go out of his way to help. The mitzvah of hashavat aveda, of return a lost item, nowadays someone can discover a cat, a dog, that it's extremely valuable to its owner. How far our Torah requires a person to go out of his or her own way to return it. Another serious matter is the law of insider information. Trace a situation, you are connected to a stock company or stock market, and you know that certain company it's about to collapse, bankruptcy or other issues involved with great loss. Obviously the secular general law, if you are insider, you are prohibited to share inside information what's going on with the stock market. But what about Jewish law? The Jewish law said that when you see your fellow collapse, as we learned many times, you have to make your great effort to inform the owner. If you see a neighbor estate, a neighbor property, and the person is not there, and all of a sudden there is a crisis, can be a huge, God forbid, storm, tornado, or whatever it is, how far you need to go out of your way to put a fence, to take care of the pipe system, or whatever involved, in order to save the property of your neighbor. So understanding human mind is the core discussion of today. And since our Torah said something that needs to be examined, because in one hand the Torah said Hashem teshivem, afilu elef pe'amim, meaning if you find a lost item, as we're going to study soon, you have to make your very best effort to return that item to the other fellow. However, if it's aveidah midat, if it's a lost item, trace a situation, you go to those countries that let the animals go free. Some of them even worship as an idol those animals. But in general, those days they didn't tie the animal with a special leash or rope or whatever it is. It's different. So you see an animal running around. What is your obligation to go out of your way to return it, especially if you feel that the owner has a knowledge. As we start at the very beginning, you see a boat, so it's a lot of involvement to return it to its owner. You can check the number, you can change the engine, you can do all your best to fix it. But the general international maritime salvage law require the owner upon return to compensate you for the expense. So here is the Mishnah Kedosha, as we said, page 30b, 12 lines from the bottom of the page. Eizohi aveda, which is the item that it's considered lost of estate. מצא חמור או פרה רועים בדרך, אין זו אבדה. So you have here, those days, it was a lot of business with animals such as donkey or cow. One discover, but as we said, it's not necessarily nowadays donkey or cow, it's springboard to discussion over all this maritime salvage law. But you see a donkey or cow grazing, and on the surface it appears that the owner of the animal were there and he leave the animal there to graze. The question is, what do you do? As we said, there are countries that let the cow free or even worship them. So when you say that it's total knowledge of the owner, so here they said, if you see it in the travel and journey and you see them grazing, it's not a lost item. חמור בכליו הפוכים, פרה רצה בין הכרמים, הרי זו אבדה. So here is a different situation. You have the donkey, and the donkey is with a counterment overturned, or cow that ran through the vineyards. So soon later you see the definition of running cow. What exactly happened to both the cow's body and the vineyard. But the key is you see it run. So apparently the owner of that animal is not aware of his donkey's or cow situation, and therefore it is considering a lost item. החזירה וברכה, אפילו 4 ו5 פעמים חייב להחזירה. Okay, so all of a sudden you go out of your way, you find this animal and you return to its owner, and guess what? The animal fled again. So you have the obligation to return. How many times? Here the Mishnah speaks as many times as it's possible. Why? חייב להחזירה, you have the obligation. The Torah repeats the word שנאמר, השב תשיבם. So the Torah said, you shall return them to your brother. So it means, even hypothetically, soon you see 1,000 times, you have to return them. The פירוshim ask a question, why are you not calling it aveda midat? You return it to the owner. The owner let that animal fled. If it happens again and again, why you don't call it in the full intent of the owner, aveda midat? Discussion later on. Hayav batel misela. So here, because you, the founder, was involved with all day returning the item, so as a result, you are not working, you occupy yourself with the return the item. Lo yomar lo, cannot say to the owner of that return estate, ten li sela. Sela was in those days the coin. He walks to return that animal to the owner. Now, the claim is that the owner of that estate can tell him, if you go to your job, that's what you're going to pay, so therefore I'm not going to pay you what you ask for. אלא נותן לו שכרו כפועל. He gives him his wage as if he were a laborer, a payment that is considerably smaller. Later, the Gemara expand on page 31b what exactly the Mishnah intends, what type of laborer, how much is a amount of money that one can pay to a laborer. Im yesham bet din, if there are rabbinic court, in general can be a three pious Jews, and the one who find the item doesn't want to be involved with this and lose his income by being occupied all day with this, so matne bifnei bet din, he go and make a very clear stipulation at the presence of the rabbinic court, and he said, I'm not ready to return the item to the owner only if I receive a full compensation of my labor. And therefore, the Bet Din are the protector, the people behind him that said, okay, you return and we are responsible that we enforce that the fellow, the owner, will compensate you for all your time. And that's the beauty. Later on in page 32, we're going to study the power of the Bet Din. So you can do that. Im ein sham Bet Din, bifnei miyatne, if he's in a circumstance that is no Bet Din, before whom he can make act of stipulation. So if he return that item, he will not return what he deserved to be paid. So therefore he prefer not to get involved with this. So they said, the big chidush, shelo kodem, his financial interest take precedence, and he does not need to return the lost item. And that's a big chidush, it's a big novelty. Why? Because let's say if it's an hourly payment, let's say it's a $50 an hour. Now what we are saying? We're saying if the lost item worth $20,000, okay? So the chidush here, the Mishnah said that one doesn't need to be occupied with something that he may not get paid his minimum wages. So the Mishnah Kedosha said in Ein Sham Bedin Bifnei Miyatne, if there is no rabbinic court presence before whom he stipulated to get his income, because a person doesn't want to be bothered to walk and search and return the items if he's not sure he gets paid. So the Mishnah said, Shelo kodem, his income take precedence, his regular job or regular business or regular income, that take precedence before making an effort to return the lost item. And that's a huge chidush, the Meforshim said. Why? Because if you analyze it logically, let's say a person make a $50 an hour, and the value of the lost item can be $20,000. Now the Mishnah said that if he's not sure to get his minimum payment of $50, let's say if he's sure he's getting only $30 and he is a regular monthly work, the hourly work is $50, so he does not need to occupy with the property that can be in value of $20,000 for our discussion if his income is less than a regular working income. So again, for those who are not sure to understand, Reuven found an item, we're just using numbers, that the item worth $20,000. Reuven is making $50 an hour. And he knows that Shimon, the one who lost the item, will pay him $30 an hour. So the Mishnah tells us that Reuven does not need to be occupied with return $20,000 item to Shimon if the income that he gets over that hour is less than the income that he made in a regular mundane type of work. And that's a big chidush. So based on that, there is a rabbinic responsa. if you have a poor person that lost an item, and the finder knew, let's say Reuven is the one who found the item that worth $20,000, and he knew that it belonged to Shimon, who is a very poor person, but he owns that whatever estate, that's his way of very basic living. But he knew that the Shimon, the indigents, the poor, will not pay Reuven whatever it is, the basic payment, let's say for $30 an hour. So the discussion among our rabbis is, Reuven allowed to use pushke, use the community discretionary fund or charity fund that poor people are entitled to get money, just because the poor person cannot pay Reuven the way that he should be paid. Anyway, the Gemara, based on the Mishnah that tells us that what is the concept of lost, if one saw a donkey that his counter around, or he saw the cow runs between the vineyard. So this, in the previous Mishnah, if you remember, we talked about utensils, about money, and so Atu kol hane de'amrinan lava veidau. All the previous item that we stated in the previous Mishnah, it's not considered not a lost item. Why we mention here in the Mishnah specifically donkey and cow? אמר רב יהודה אמר רב אחי כאמר, איזוהי כלל האבידה שהוא חייב בה? When do you know that the one who lost an item, it's clear that the owner knew where is the item, and yet the one who discovered it had the obligation to return it to its owner? מצא חמור ופרה רואים בדרך, if one discovered either donkey or cow graze, אין זו אבדה ולא מחייב בה. Why? As we said earlier in the Mishnah, because apparently the owner of that item knows and he left it intentionally. חמור וכליו הפוכים, פרה ורצה בין הכרמים, if it's the two scenarios we mentioned in Mishnah, donkey counterpart upside down, or cow ran between the vineyard. הרי זו אבדה ומחייב בה. So that's clearly a lost property and is obligated to return it. Why? Because we assume the owner not left it intentionally, and the owner is not aware that lost item is there, and therefore anything in that category you are obligated to return it to its owner. So the Gemara asks ul olam. It means that that's idea that even if the graves they're unintended forever. אמר רב יהודה אמר רב עד 3 ימים. רב יהודה אמר רב said, if one sees an animal graze and it's the beginning, first day, second day, you assume that it's a dad be'alim, that the owner is aware of that. But if it's exceeded more than 3 days, then you assume that it's shelo midad be'alim, that the owner is not aware of that, and therefore you have the obligation to return it to its owner. Heichei dami, what exactly the statement of Rav Yehuda meant? I belelvata afilu chadashata. If he saw that animal in the middle of the night, even it's 1 hour, one time, nami. So clearly it's a lost item. It's not by any means with the intent of the owner. Why? Because generally speaking, the owner put all the animals in the closed enclosure bar area. Right? Ibi mama, if you discover it during the day, afilu tuva namelo. Even if he sees the animal more than 3 days, he does not have the obligation to return it. So, because it's a possibility for the owner to leave it there to graze every day. So when exactly the statement of Rav Yehuda that states that there are 3 days period that the animal is grazed out there, and from that point onward it's considering as a lost item. Just remember that in the Talmudic time they don't have electricity, right? That's way before electricity. So when they have those time, it's basically from the dawn, from the sunrise to the sunset. One of the pious people in Yerushalayim in the past generation, his name is Rabbi Shmuel Hominer, may he rest in peace. So the student came to his apartment one time. It was about 8:30 in the evening, winter time. So his wife looked at them and she said, you know, that was way before electricity and this back early 1900s. So she said he is going to sleep right after Mariv, and then he wake up in the middle of the night to study. But the point is, those days, the whole setup of time was based on the sunrise, sunset. So anyway, the Gemara responds with Tzricha, the Hava Chazela Bekadmeta, that he saw that animal early in the morning before the sun rise, before dawn, meaning it's still not the time for the animals to go out and graze. And also he saw the animal after time, which is after the time that the owners taking their animals and put them inside the barn. Tlata Yomi amrinan itramuye itramela venafka. So if you have here a situation of 3 days, for the first 3 days we say it happened that the animal went out a bit earlier or a bit later than usual, but anyway it was with the owner's knowledge. Tfei, but when you exceeded more than 3 days, Vadai Avedai, for sure it's a lost item. So Tosfot explained to us that that's the meaning of the Mishnah, Eizohi Aveda, anything that we can have a discussion when Matai Nikra Aveda, when exactly we call it a lost item. So now the Gemara brings a Braita statement that dealing with that segment of 3 days period. Tanya Nameachi, Matzah Talit Vekardom. The Braita teaches us if one found a clock or an ox, page 31, Be'isratia. Be'isratia, that's the thoroughfare, a main road that occupied by many. Para ratza ben akramim, or a cow that runs through the vineyards. Harei zo aveda. So that's definitely a type of aveda or lost, and soon you see the 4 different categories of understanding this concept of aveda, but let's read it first. However, talit betzad gader, kardom betzad gader, if a fellow discover a cloth that is alongside a fence, so there is a concept we learned several times. It's called makom mishtamer, a place that was designated for certain things. So even the owner forget to pick it up, when all of a sudden they realize that they lost that item, they will go back and pick it up from that location, another avenue, and that's based on the Tosfot here, and Tosfot earlier on page 25b, is a location that the owner intended purposely to put it there. Such as, I'm just give you the vignette of Tosfot, very bottom of 25b. I'm just using a current day's expressions. Imagine there is a site that they do constructions, and the people who works there need to come back to work on a daily basis. So those working construction people, they designated a certain location to put all their clothing, or in those days was like in that field. So when you discover those, it's basically items that it's not a lost item. So as we said earlier, the one whom we think lost, it designated that place to be the pickup place or to be the place that they remember to take. So the intent is to return there. So they said, if one discover talit betzad gader, a cloth alongside of a fence, kardom betzad gader, axe alongside a fence, upara ro'a ben akramim, or a cow grazing among the vineyards. The Vilna Gaon said ben asabim. Anyway, the idea is that the ro'a, it's a graze, ein zo aveda. That's not taken as a lost property. Therefore, the one who discovered it does not have the obligation to go ahead and return or search for its owner. Now, if one sees those items for 3 days, you have 3 consecutive days. The assumption is that the owner not leave the item for 3 consecutive days. It means, the way Rashba explained, you see it in others, that the owner is not aware that it's over there. So therefore, the mitzvah of returning the lost item apply. ראה מים ששוטפין ובאים, הרי זה גודר בפניהם. So here you have a situation that flowing water can be, God forbid, a tornado, sudden flooding, or all kind of things that happen by nature or things that just happen. So he's watching his fellow next door field that all of a sudden inundated with floating water. So he's concerned that it may ruin the estate of his next door, for example. So what did he do? He had the mitzvah to establish a barrier before the water in order to preserve the field. So the Mefarshim explains, the commentators, that here you have a big chidush, which is, if you go by the mitzvah, the Torah tells us in Shabbat Aveda, in returning a lost item, lo tir'eh et shor achicha, you should not go and see your brethren, ox or seyor, these other animals, deserted, neglected, nidachim. And the Torah said, v'chen ta'aseh lechamoro, v'chen ta'aseh lesimlato, the same way you should do for his donkey, for garments or clothes that belongs to your fellow. So one may think, okay, I have the obligation to do it when it's come to the fellow's animal, but when it's come to a real estate from this estate, maybe that's not part of my obligation. So that's the chidush here. They say that even in the state, even in the karka, im meniat hahezek, if by building a fence, building a barrier, you can avoid the damage of someone else, you have the mitzvah to erect the fence and stop the flowing water. Now, from here, the Rambam in Ilchot Gzela V'Aveda, chapter 11, you see it also in the Ritva, expand a lot of this important mitzvah, because it's a question. It's not a simple question. Let's trace, practically speaking, the derivative. If you tell me about items, property, and you tell me even estate, so if you have inside information of a stocks, and you know that is a fellow that put money in that stock, and you know that that fellow have no other money, extra, but only in that stock, and he or she have a lot of, let's say, expenses, children or whatever it is, and you have Rahmanus, you have compassion on them. The problem is, in this state, for example, you have a federal law, and the federal law prohibited a person from divulging, from relieving information that it's an inside information of those companies, right? So one needs to go and ask a permanent posek, what should you do? Because if you go by the way the Rambam tells us in Ilchot Gzela V'Avedat chapter 11, or you go by the Shulchan Aruch Shel Mishpat Reish Samech Aleph 261, apparently the halacha follow Rava, which means that the V'chen Taseh, it's not only ox and donkey or simla, but it's also real estate. So you can argue, you said, how much so if it's a stock? If I can save my fellow from losing his pants in one of those companies, so how can I sit idly and not do something? But I don't want to risk myself and I don't want to violate the federal, the state law. Anyway, that's a good question for a permanent posek, but based on our sugya, the chidush here, it's if you go by literal text of the Torah, it's just animals, but if you go by the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam, it's also a real estate. Now, another din, of Hashavat Aveda, Amar Rava, if you go by the Chumash Dvarim, chapter 22, verse 3, the Torah said, V'chen ta'aseh lechol avedat achicha. The same law applies to any lost item of you brethren. So what is lechol? So that applies lerabot avedat karka. Now you see a clear statement of Rava, and by the way, it's halacha l'maaseh, which is fascinating. The Rava said that since you felt a state that it may be wounded, you have to do your very best to avoid damage. You can argue, said it's immovable object, but still, that's the chidush here. Amar leRav Chananya leRava, Tanya demsaya lach. I can bring something that prove your point. Ra'am ha'im sheshotfim uba'im, harei ze goder bifnehem. If a fellow saw a water that is flowing and coming to inundate another's field, he must establish a barrier before the water in order to preserve the field. So it means that one have the obligation to save your fellow estate. Now, that's the derivative of Hashavat Aveda. The derivative is that it's applied also on the karka, on the estate. Rava rejected and says, from here you cannot bring a proof. Hacha, here in our Braita, B'mayaskin, and what exactly we're speaking about? What? B'de'ika omarin. We are speaking about the circumstance that they have sheaves, there are sheaves of grains on the land. So the idea is the Tana of the Braita is talking about preservation of the sheaves, not the land itself. So the Gemara asks, the Ika Omarim, if this Braita speaks about the field in which there are sheaves of grains, what's the purpose of stating it? Isn't it obvious that one is obligated to preserve the sheaves as he will do in any other items? So the Gemara says, Lo tzricha de itba omarim de tzrichei le'ar'a. It's necessary because here the case is that the sheaves needs the land in order to dry. So the Ritva explained that those sheaves were not yet being harvested. So even the potential, they need to be harvested, but they still need to be attached to the land until they totally dry out. Mahu de tema, kevan de tzrichei le'ar'a, ki gufa de ar'a damyan. Since you may think that these sheaves needs the land in order to stay to stay dry, so you treat it the same as land itself, and therefore you do not have the obligation to safeguard from loss for those sheaves. Kamma, so then the Batra teaches us that even though those sheaves are still attached to the ground, since they are befitting to be cut, so therefore we treat them as independent entities. They are not part of the land, and therefore you have the obligation to safeguard that they are not being damaged. Now, therefore, from the Batra, we do not have a re'ayah, we don't have a proof. Now, it's the poskim, the rabbis have a big discussion based on our sugya. Ad kama adam mechuyab, how far a person is obligated to do this type of returning an item. Imagine you go, I'm speaking modern days, right? So you go home and you see a car that the light is still on, okay? And you know it will eat up the battery. I'm talking about old days cars, okay? New, as you know, it's a different story, right? So you know that in the morning this neighbor will need to purchase a new battery if you don't tell him, right? So you have the chiyuv, you have the obligation to search who is the owner of that car. Now you're spending a half hour, 2 hours to find out who is the owner of that car, to knock every apartment in that building, and to find out who is the owner to make sure that he turns on off the light. How far? The later Avoshner Zatzal also been asked how far a person needs to have tircha to impose on himself this great effort. And Avoshner, in one of his teshuvot, one of his responses dealing with Gidrei Aveida Midat, what exactly the definition of a person have the knowledge of a lost item, such as a fellow park in a place that he knew is a problematic. It's a place that you should not park your car there, okay? And all of a sudden, there's no parking, let's say in the city or whatever it is, and you realize that fellow Jew, he parked there, you know, you saw the fellow walking, you don't know where is he now, and you see already the law enforcement coming down and start giving you huge tickets to all those cars. Now, you have a job to do, right? Do you have kind of obligation, some sort of a Shabbat Avedah to search for the owner, or you treat it as Avedah Midat? That's a question that the later Rav Wozner asked. That it's a knowledge of the owner. Why? Because you park there, you know that it's a problematic to park in that area. Either you read a sign or whatever it is, and therefore, Avedah Midat, why should I spend time and energy and money to search for you? Anyway, it's all based on this sugya, it's rabbinic writing. Now the next part, we're dealing with the Mishnah. Matzah chamor upara. Matzah chamor upara. The Mishnah tells us if one found a donkey or a cow grazing on the path, that it's not deemed lost property. Now, what exactly the problem here? You have a Reisha and you have a Seifa. You have the first part, you have the last part. The first part said, if you just see a cow grazing or donkey, so leave it alone. But the last clause said that if you see the donkey have these items that they put around donkeys, turnabout, or you see the cow run between the vineyard, so that's considering a Avida. So Rashi explained to us, Tarte legriuta, there are two chesronot, two issues here, two deficiencies. One, Rashi said, Ika tarte למעליותה חד דרועה, ועוד, דאפילו רצה לו מסתק והרצה בין הכרמים, Ika tarte לגריותה חד דרצה, ועוד הכרמים מסק ולה. הנה מתלך למרחקים, רואה בין הכרמים חד לגריותה דזימין מסתק בה. So here, Rashi tells us that when it's come to animals that it's ro'a baderech, that it's graze on the regular pathway. So it's a two places. The animal graze, right? The other side is totally gluta. One, the animal run, versus if the cow graze. Run is a downside, graze is okay. Ben akramim, between the vineyards, is another point that you can say that the animal can cause herself, the cow, damage on her body, and the vineyard can be damaged. So therefore, the Gemara said, Hagufa Kashya, right? This Mishnah contradicts himself. Why? At the beginning you said that if you see a donkey or a cow grazing, it's not considering a lost item, because you assume that the owner of that animal left it with midat, with full knowledge, in order for the animal to graze there. Right from here, or if those animal graze, that's not considering a lost item. But if the animal ran or grazed between the vinegar, havya aveda, because you assume that the owner did not left it midat, with the full knowledge. So, as we said, based on our Mishnah, the Gemara here dealing with four different avenues. One, the animal is graze, ro'a baderech. Two, the animal graze between the vineyard. Number three is ratza baderech, the animal ran through the forest, that's the down part, griuta. Ratza ben akramim, the animal runs between the vineyard. So the Mishnah speaks about ro'a baderech, ratza ben akramim, graze or run between the vineyard. And the Nat speaks about the other two, which is ro'a ben akramim or ratza baderech. So here the Gemara said, ha ratza baderech ro'a ben akramim havya aveda. Ema seifa chamo v'kra b'chvuchim para ratza ben akramim. If he sees the donkey that the item are upside down, right, overturned, or a cow that ran through the vineyards, what you said, areizo aveda, it's a lost property. So the way that it's written, it may be inferred that only if the animals running through the vineyards is a lost property. Specifically, dafka. However, ha-ratza baderech, but if they're running on the path, ve'ro'a ben akramim, or path, or grazing among the vineyards, ein zu aveda, it's not a lost property. So it means that the first and the last part contradict each other. Amar Abaye yagid alav rei'o. Gilav rei'o, meaning its implication from the book of Job, chapter 36. The idea is that over there it was the sounds of the ra'am, the sounds of the thunder already inform us that it's upcoming rain. So obviously it's a figurative idea that each and every din in the Mishnah we can derive explanation of the second one. Tana ro'a baderech delo havya aveda vehu adin ro'a ben akramim. We learn that a case of grazing on a path where the animal is not considered a lost property, and the same is true in the case that the animal is grazing among the vineyards. Tana ratza ben akramim da'avya aveda. We taught a case that's running through the vineyards where the animal is considered the lost property. Vehu hadin leratza baderech. And the same is true, the case of animal is running in the path. So the Maharam Shif explained that regardless if the animal is run, it's already considered the lost item, regardless if it's a vineyard or other path. So as you see, according to Abaye, Ro'a, graze, is always not considering Aveda. And Ratza and Ran is always Aveda, lost item. Amar le Rava said to Abaye, if you tell me that the style of the Mishnah is a counterpart to tell about it, so litne kilta v'kol shem chamir, that you should teach first the lenient law, and then the stringent one, like in a gradation, a graduate way. Litne ratza baderech, the avya aveda. First you said the animal ran in the path, that's clearly a lost item. V'chol sheken, and we learn in the Kal Vachomer that how much so when it's come to what? Ratza ben akramim. Ratza ben akramim, the animal ran between the vineyard, the animal יכולה יותר להינזק, can be damaged way more. וליתני רואה בין הכרמים דלא הביא אבדה וכל שכן רואה בדרך. So let us learn the grazing of the animal, the vineyard is not a lost property, and all the more so. And וליתני רואה בין הכרמים דלא הביא אבדה וכל שכן, and all the more so it's not lost property when it is grazing on the path. וכל שכן רואה בדרך. So because the Mishnah speaks about the animals that run on the path and animals that we call grazing between the vineyard, right? That's not the way the Mishnah said. The Mishnah is specifically speaking about ro'a b'derech, grazing on the path, or ratza, or run between the vineyard. So it means that the Mishnah did not have the intent that one din, one halacha can teach the others. Usually the Tana wants to be succinct and short and not to be garlic or verbose with words. But here, the chidush here, that if you just find animal grazing, it's not considering a lost item. Or the other way around, if animals run, is always a lost item. That's the way Abaye said. But the Mishnah in general brings things that is more chidush, which is if you have an animal that graze between the vineyard, that's not considering a lost item, versus animal that run on a path, that's chezkat aveda. We assume that it's a lost item. Now Rava go and explain the Mishnah in a different way. Ela ma Rava, ratza lo kasher. Rava tells us that do not think that the contradiction, the apparent contradiction in the Mishnah, when we are speaking about a circumstance while the animal ran toward the path, it's not a question. You know why? לא כאשר הדאפה לגבי דברה, הדאפה לגבי מטה. Now, it's important to understand first what it says and what it means. What it says in that the first part, the Reisha, the first clause of the Mishnah, speak about the animals that their head toward the field, and the last clause of the Mishnah speaks about the animals that they ran to the city, coming close to the owner. But it's not davka, it's not purposely written that way. It means if you look at the way it was the Mishnah explained to us is this way. So it means the first clause will speak about the cow that it grazed in the path, that's not considered a lost item, and will not mention a cow that ran on the path, because there are situations that cow runs in the path that it's considering a lost item, such as when the cow face is toward the field. The last part is just the way the other one. When you see when the Para ratza ben akaramim, the cow runs between the vineyard that it's considering chezkat avida, framework of a lost item, and not mention cow that runs the path, because there are situations that there is a cow that runs on the path, that it's not considering a chezkat avida, that it's not considering a lost item, when the path, when the animal runs toward the path of the city, meaning it's running toward the owner, and therefore it's not b'chezkat avida. Rava continues. Ro'a, lama lo kashya. The apparent contradiction in the Mishnah when it's come to animal that is grazed between the vineyard, that the first clause we thought that it's considering a lost item and the last one it's not. Also not a question. Can the first one ba'avidat gufa, can ba'avidat karka. Just remember, when you see a cow run in the field, in the vineyard, right? So you have two entities here. One, the cow, the animal, damaged its body, which is monetary damage to its owner of that animal. It scratched it more. The other phase of that is the animal caused damage to the property. So therefore, the first part of the Mishnah, when you speak about animal that graze between the vineyard, it's not considering a lost item. It's speak about what? Saving the animal's body. The last part of the Mishnah, when you say that she's grazed between the vineyards, then it's considering the lost item. Here we talk about damage that the animal causes to what? To the vineyards. And let's expand on that. Kikatani, when the Mishnah teaches us, Ro'a baderech lo avi avida. Ha ben akramim havi avida. When the Mishnah speaks about graze on the path, that it's not considering chezkat avida, which we derive from that if the animal grazed between the vineyard, it is. We're not speaking about the animal that it's a lost item, but avedat karka. We have a concern that the animal can cause damage to the vineyard, and therefore we have to pull it out from that and return it to its owner. As the Pilpula Harifta explained, that even as we learned earlier from the Choshen Mishpat and the Rambam, that karka also is possibility of avida. As we explained, that a person is obligated to, if he sees a potential damage to his fellow field, he have to make his best to avoid that damage. And when we learn the Mishnah, the animal run between the vineyard is considering a potential of a lost item. When the animal is grazed between the vineyard, is not considering a potential lost item. Why? Ba'avidat gufa, which means we talk about the loss of the animal itself. Meaning that even the animal is grazed between those kramim, those vineyards. The concern is that otherwise it will run away from its owner. The chidush here, that's not the concern. The concern is that the animal can cause damage to itself. And that's the damage for the loss for the owner. The ratza ben akramim misakva, that when the animal running among the vineyards is typically wounded, and therefore all the thorn there caused the damage, and that's considering a aveidah loss damage. Vero'a ben akramim, an animal grazing among the vineyards, lo misakva. The animal is not typically wounded, so therefore it's not caused the animal damage. Therefore, It's not בחזקת אבידה. Meaning it's אבידה לקרקע, but not אבידה לבהמה. So now the Gemara asks the end of Rava's statement. ורואה בין הכרמים נהידה לו מסקווה טיפוק למשום אבידת קרקע. When you talk about what? Grazing among the vineyards, so what we learn? We learn the halachot of lost property, it's not applied. Although it's not wounded, why it's derived halachot of lost property applied due to the loss of sense of damage to the land caused by the animal. So they said, Teipuk למishum avidat karka. Why? Because the animal caused damage to those vineyards while it's grazing there. So the Gemara said, B'dechuti. So you can say that that's the case. We talk about the vineyard of someone who's idol worshipper. And it's important to know what the Torts tells us in Dvarim chapter 22 verse 3. We have the mitzvah, we have the obligation, as Gemara Bava Kamma 113b said, to return it to our brethren. Others, you want to do it to be good, to create peace and to be nice, etc., etc. But you don't obligate to do it. You have a fellow as idol worshiper, you don't have the obligation to do that for him. So therefore you don't have the chiyuv, you don't have the obligation to pull out the animal in order to save those vineyards from damage. So the Gemara asks, "V'teipukle mishum avidat gufa the dilma kachlula." You may say that you have to pull out the animal from that vineyard of that idol worship, but for different reason. Because it's a loss of what? The animals itself. Why? Because those idol worshippers potentially can kill the animal. They see, you go to south area, certain places, no names, right? They kill. In a second, the animals get in, boom. It's not your place, the animal gets into my property, start shooting, right? So they said, Batra de Matru, there's a place here that talk about that they forewarned the owner. Vehadar katli. First, they warn, and then, if it happens, it happens, he killed it. So, in a way, he warned the owner of the animal first, before he did. V'dilma hatruba. Maybe it happens that those idol worshippers forewarned the owner of the animal one time. And now, if the one who find it not return the animals, they kill the animal. So the Gemara say, Atruba lo izdaharba vadai avida midati. If they already forewarned the owner with regard to the animal, and the owner did not heed the warning, this is certainly a case of deliberate loss where there is no obligation to return it. So based on that, there is a diun in a poskim, there is a discussion among the rabbis. What are you doing with the tzar ba'alei chayim? Cause the animal sorrow. What exactly, how that definition applies here? Furthermore, the whole idea of the time frame involved with that discovery of Mציעא, Zman HaMetzia, the time that it was discovered. So there is the tshuva from the late Rabbi Akiva Iger Zatzal. He asked about a fellow non-Jew that lost an item. The fellow Jew find it. Meanwhile, fellow Jews search, and the non-Jew converted to Judaism. So Rabbi Akiva asks, now we have an obligation to return to him or not, based on this Gemara. So he brought what we learn on page 28. If you remember, on page 28, Rabbi Akiva referred to the concept of if something that is not shvepruta, meaning at the time of the discovery of the lost item, that item does not have the value of pruta, and later on, after the time of searching and everything and discovering the owner, now it's worth some money. So based on the Gemara, they said that you have the kinyan zchiyah, the finder already acquired because we go the time that he discovered. So therefore, the Kiva posek that he doesn't have, he wants to go lifnim b'shuat l'din, that's different, but by the halacha, apparently, ostensibly, he doesn't need to return it. So it's a conclusion. We need to understand that there's a, obviously we're limited with time, there is a machloket between the Rashi and the Rosh. But let's go with the basic on the Rashi. So we said, if someone me'abed mamono ladat, if someone losing his money intentionally, so the person is behaving in such a not smart way, right? We don't have the obligation to return it. If you remember, we studied on page 25b. So let's put together what we learned. If someone discover an animal that it's graze on the path, just grazing animal, traveling, you see animal that's graze, leave it alone. You don't need to do anything. It's not considering aveidah, a lost item, just you leave it alone. Second one, you see an animal, for example, cow, runs between the vineyard. Wow. No, now it's vadaya veda, it's for sure a lost item. And we are concerned that while the animals run, as Rashi explained, the animal can cause damage to its body. Now, the third one, you see an animal run on the path. Just see animal runs, right? So now the question is, if the animal runs face toward the city, what we learn, it runs to the owner, and it's not bechizkat aveda. Versus if the animal runs outside of the city toward the field, so it's bechizkat aveda, it's considering a lost item, and the person needs to return to the owner. Now, if the fourth scenario, discover animals who are ben akramim, graze among those vineyard, so the animal itself, it's not considering a lost item. Only if you have a concern that people there can kill the animal. Why? Because we said there are different people in different behavior. There are those who forewarn the owner and tell, this is my property, don't let your animal in. If they come in, I'm going to shoot the animal. But the Rosh explained that if those vineyards belong to a fellow Jew, you have the obligation to pull out the animal from that property. Midina vedat karka, from that concept of law, lost an estate. So again, the whole condition is the big question if it's by a non-Jewish property or by Jewish property, otherwise it's considered aveidah. The Ritva Ed, he says, when it comes to animal that it's Ratza ben Akramim that runs in the vineyard, you have to have a clear differentiation between the location that you have to pull out because it's considering Avedat Hakramim, the loss of the land, the vineyard, versus you have to pull it out because you consider they're going to kill the animal. If the chiyuv, if the obligation, the Ritva explained, it's because Avedat Karka, loss of the property, you have the obligation only to pull the animal from that location, but you don't have the obligation to return it to its owner. And it's enough that you leave the animal in a place that it's grazing location, that animal can freely graze and not cause the animal to run away from its owner. Versus if the one, Ritva explained, pull the animal because he's concerned that they're going to kill the animal, so he is really occupied with return the animal to its owner, and therefore he needs to return to a location which, considering a chatzir hamishtameret shel baal habehema, which means a location that is total safeguard, protected by the owner of the animal. And as we said, that's the view of Rashi. Rabbi Moshe disagree. He said that you have to return it to physically to its owner, even if he started to occupy himself because of that karka, but pulling out the animal, it caused the animal to run away from its owner, so you have to return it to the owner. Rabbi Moshe said, "Matchil mitzvah אומרים לו, pull it out and make sure that the owner have it back in a full capacity." Now the Gemara continues with the explanation of the Mishnah Kedosha. החזירה וברחה. So we learn the Mishnah, one discover an animal and you return it to its owner, run away, return to the owner, run away. So we learn from the Hashev Deshimem that one have the obligation even 4 or 5 times to go back and all the schlep back the animal to its owner. Now the Gemara expand on that idea. One of the great sages said to the Rabbah, Eima Hashev Chadazimna. You may entertain the thought that when the Torah said the word Hashev, which sounds, it resonates as singularity, so one time you have to return it. Teshivem Treizimne. Teshivem, 2 times you have the obligation to return. After that, you don't have an obligation. So how do you know that even 4 and 5 times? Amalei Rabbi explained, if you look at the structure of the pasuk of the verse, Hashev afilu me'a pe'amim mashma. So the Torat Chaim, the Rambam פירוש המשניות, and others said that Hashev can go in interpretation many ways. 1 time, 100 times. But because the Torah add right after the word Hashev, and you know that the Torah is very prudent in every word, they use the word Teshivem, following the word Hashev, we derive a different rules, which is Ein li ela leveito. We understand that that obligation applies to what? To return the animal to the owner's house. From where is the halakha derived that one may return animal to his garden or his building in rooms? How do you know it? Leginato ulechurvato minayin. Talmud lomar teshivem mikol makom. Torah said that teshivem, the return lost animals, he fulfilled the mitzvah of returning it regardless. Even to the garden, whatever it is, fulfill his obligation. So the Gemara challenged and said, Hey Chedame, what exactly the ribuy hashava we derive from the garden or chuva? Ideminatera, if you tell me that that garden or that ruin area, they are protected, it's obvious that who want to return the animal fulfill his obligation. Pshita. You don't need, there is no chidush here. You don't need to derive it from the ribui Hashem Teshiveh. Id lo minatra. If you tell me that that location is not protected, amai. Why? he really needs. Why he allowed to return the lost animal, the lost item there, to flee again, to run again from its owner. This is more explained. Leolam, for sure, Rava speaks about what? Gina and Churva, garden and the ruined place, dimnatra, that is chatzera mishtameret, that's something that is secure, v'haka mashmalan. And what the derivative from the pasuk is, telo be'inan da'at be'alim, that we, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Hashavat Aveidah, we do not need the knowledge of the owner that the lost item returned to the owner. Meaning, Reuven discovered an item that belongs to Shimon. Reuven had the obligation to return the lost item to the garden or other chatzera mishtameret or other location that belongs to the owner, and he fulfilled his obligation by doing so, even though the owner, Shimon, of that item, lost item, not aware that his lost item was found and it's located in location so and so. This followed the rule of Rabbi Lazar, that point of Rava follow. דאמר הכל צריכים דעת בעלים חוץ מהשבת אבדה. Thief, robber, anyone, soon you see the Rambam, any one of those that stole an item have the obligation not only to return, if you are a shomer, if you are a guardian, you have to return the item to its owner and make sure that the owner is aware that you returned the item. And you don't fulfill your obligation, as Rashi explained, until the owner totally aware that that's returned to him. However, when it's come to lost item, that's different. Even without the knowledge of the owner, שהתורה ריבתה השבות הרבה, because the Torah amplified the halacha to permit multiple forms of return by means of the compound verb. It's written, Hashev teshivem, among them return without the owner knowledge. So let's start with the Taz. The Taz said that lechatchila it is better adif sheyodia. Discover a talit, for example, belong to someone. You search. You have to make sure when you return it that the owner know that he was his talit. The Rambam in Ilchot Gzeila V'Aveda, chapter 1, Seif 8, said if one stole an item and its owner became aware of the theft, the thief fulfills his obligation to return the stolen item only if the owner is aware that it was returned. Yet the Rambam said in Ilchot Gzeila V'Aveda, chapter 11, one who returns a lost item to the owner, garden, or room fulfills his obligation to return the item. And you see it also in Choshen Mishpat, Reish Samech Zayin 267. So now we ask about other chiyuvim. We have the Gemara here, have additional mitzvot that the Torah employs the compound of the verb form. Take for example the Shiluach HaKen. Shiluach HaKen, the obligation to dispatch the mother bird from the nest. There is a mitzvah in the Torah, in Deuteronomy 22 verse 6 and 7. For one who finds a nest which the mother bird is sitting on her eggs, or with her fledglings, to send the mother bird away before taking the eggs or the fledgling. That's, the sages said it's only in a kosher bird. But anyway, so shaleach teshalach et ha'em, eima shaleach chad hazimna, you need to do it only once, teshalach trei zimnei, twice, but more than that, maybe not. So the Gemara in Chulin 141, you see also in the Tosfot here, the whole idea of the Torah dibra b'lishon bnei Adam. Torah speaks in the language of the people. Anyway, אמר לשלח אפילו 100 פעמים משמע, as we said earlier, even 100 times. תשלח אין לי אלא דבר הרשות, for example, eating that Torah prohibited. But if you need that bird, לדבר מצווה מנין, you have a mitzvah that applies to a bird. If you remember, we learned in a few places, Tractate Kinim, other places. You have a leper, and you need to basically purify the leper. So what do? You take two fledgling, a bird, and you take one, and you combine it with etz erez and ezov, as the Torah said, and shni tolad, with the other bird, and the Torah said in Vayikra chapter 14 how you do it. So therefore, if one come to purify a leper, and all of a sudden he sees a nest with a bird sitting on its fledgling, he must, Rashi explained, let the mother go before he do it. Otherwise, based on Gemara Chulin 141, we learn the whole halachot of Metzora and the importance and the urgency of doing it right away. Talmud lomar teshalach mikol makom. Even he come to take it l'dvar mitzvah. Tosfot, as we said, bring the hava mina. You have mitzvah daseh of Metzora. It's not doche, it's not override. Lo tikach ha'em al habanim, you should not take the mother with its baby fledgling. Shalech teshalach. That's the whole idea of shlom bayit. The Chtam Sofer, he bring the Chavot Yair, discuss the issue of shiluach haken b'Shabbat. Because we all know the Zohar. The Zohar said that the mitzvah of shiluach haken, the mother is mekonenet, the mother is crying over that, and that create rachamim for the whole world. It's a lot of write up, and it's incongruous, it's inappropriate to do it on Shabbat. Anyway, the Torah tells us in the book of Vayikra, chapter 19, if someone sees another fellow Jew that does something wrong, committed a sin, he needs to admonish, to rebuke him. And that's what the Rambam in Hilchot Deot chapter 6 said. So, אמר לאומי מדרבנן לרבה, ואם ההוכח חד הזימנה, תוכיח שתי זימני. So you tell someone you're doing wrong, you committed the sin once, twice, and then leave him alone. אמר להוכח אפילו 100 פעמים במשמע. When you admonish, when you rebuke someone, even 100 times. תוכיח, אין לי אלא רב לתלמיד, you may think that the concept of תוכחה applies only from the teacher to its students. תלמיד לרב מנין, when the disciple realizes that its teacher is wrong, how do we know that he needs to tell his teacher? תלמוד לומר, הוכח, תוכיח, mikol makom. So you derive from the הוכח, תוכיח to teach that one is obligated to rebuke another in any case that warrants rebuke. So obviously, even the student can do it, the Ritva explain, it needs to do it in a respectful way. You say, for example, our teacher, don't you teach us so and so and so? And by the way, you learn, as the Gemara in Kiddushin 32 said, that he learned that it was wrong of him to do it. The Moshav Zkenim is one of the commentary on the Torah. He said at the beginning of Chumash Dvarim, the Torah said, Eila Advarim, this is the words of admonition that the Shar Diber Moshe, that Moshe Rabbeinu said before he passed away. Samuch leptirato. So close to his end of life. Don't you know that Moshe Rabbeinu had the obligation to rebuke the people? But obviously, one of the teaching Moshe can explain is close to its deathbed, close to its end of life, he felt, in a way, Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom, that his word will be taken much seriously and be accepted. Sometimes you feel you're wasting your time by trying to rebuke certain people at a certain time. Now the Gemara continues with all kind of situation that the Torah repeats for a reason. Azov ta'azov imo, if one sees an animal that's loaded, and you see someone chamos or na'acha, someone you don't like, Shemot 23, you have the obligation to unload, to load and unload. Ein bi ela be'alav imo, she'in ba'alav imo minayin. If the owner is elderly or sick, how do you know that you have to unload from the animal, the whatever it is, the materials? Talmud lomar azov ta'azov mikol makom. So you derive azov ta'azov because the Torah repeats it. Even the owner not helping you is sick, is elderly. You have the obligation to help. But the explanation later on we see, it's obviously with the condition that the person really cannot put together and help, not just taking advantage of someone. Hakem takim imo, ein li ela be'alav imo, en be'alav imo, if the owner is elder or sick minayin, Talmud lomar hakem takim mikol makom. Here is a chidush, that even if the owner not helping, he still have the obligation to load it in any case. So why the Torah needs to write the compound verse when it's come to teach the obligation, the owner absent, to unloading, and why the Torah speak about the loading animal, why you needed both? That's the way Rashi Tosfot is a little different, but anyway, we go by the Rashi. צריכה. דיקה תבח הפריקה ואמינה משום דיקה צער בעלי חיים. If the Torah speaks about unloading, it's because what? Suffering of animals. ועיקר חסרון כיס, it's also monetary loss. Why? Because the animal, if you don't quickly unload the stuff from the animal will suffer, die. So it causes him a monetary loss. אבל טעינה בלאו צער בעלי חיים איתה. But unload, that it's not involved צער בעלי חיים. The Ritva challenge that. What is the צער קל, not צער קל? What's the level of the sorrow of them? ולא חסרון כיסיתה. Not monetary loss. אימה לא. ויש מן טעינה משום דבסחר, which is, as we learn in several places, that the person doesn't have the obligation to upload. If it's free, he have the obligation to do it for free, to unload. אבל פריקה לבחינם אימה. But when it's unload, which is performed for free, I will say that there is no obligation to unload the animal when the owner is not present. So therefore, tzricha. So we need both dinim. The Shita Mikubetzet to expand on that. There is a tshuva of the Noida Biyuda, the great Rav Landau of Czechoslovakia. It speaks about what is the geder, what is the definition of animal suffering, what is the tzar ba'alei chayim. Ad Kamma. Trace the situation, someone will hold a stick on his animal, you see it to this very day, that the animal should go faster. Someone can ask about horse race or other things. You see people holding this big stick and hit the animal. That's for sure tzar ba'alei chayim, right? Or how about someone ask a question about a choker chain? Do you know what is a choker chain? Do you use for dogs or whatever it is? The Minchat Yitzchak, the great Dayan Weiss, which I have the privilege to have as Kamma for one of my books for me, may rest in peace. Dayan Weiss have a discussion in halacha nowadays. What do you do when you have a chicken coop? You have a big chicken coop, you have a lot of chickens. Unfortunately, you see today a lot of cruelty, right? You see how they put in a cage, who knows, 10, 12 chickens together, right? But trace the situation the Minchat Yitzchak asked, Dayan Weiss the Tzad. So he asked, trace the situation, one is the owner of that chicken coop. He makes a living, he lives in a moshav, he lives in one of the places that the main income is from selling eggs, okay? All of a sudden, he gets to his chicken coop and he noticed that a lot of chickens produce very close to nothing eggs. So what did he do? He let them starve for 2-3 days, only give them water. As a result, they lose their feathers. Then later on, he started feeding them, and they start getting a fresh feather, and they start from scratch. And now they produce tremendous amount of eggs. So he argued that is the issue of Tzar Balei Chaim involved. Another question they ask about Shabbat, if you see animals that struggle, how far you allow when it's come to violation of Shabbat. Anyway, ולרבי שמעון דאמר אף טעינה בחינם מהי איכא למימר. So the Gemara said, according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that even loading must be performed for free, what is there to say, to explain what is necessary to repeat the obligation with regard to uploading? So the Gemara said, Rabbi Shimon לא מסיים מקרא. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's not clearly defined which of the verses is referring to loading and which is referring to unloading. Because the Torah is written one verse, it will have been interpreted to referring to unloading, and one might assume that he doesn't need to load an animal in the absence of the owner. It's a machloket. Rabbeinu Asher, the Rosh and the Ran, many others. The whole idea of prika bechinam. Prika bechinam, to do it, uploading for free, it's different from Asharat Aveidah. Because the Rosh said that the owner of the donkey, for example, needs to pay for the loss of income. Versus Rabbeinu Nissim that said the Torah has a chiyuv, clear obligation of Hasharat Aveidah, of return items. Therefore, you cannot collect fund from that. Furthermore, the Chavot Yair ask if the whole concept of Tzar Balei Chaim can apply also when it's come to people. For example, when it's come to Tuma de Rabbanan, so we wake up the Kohen even in the middle of the night, leave their house. So there's a tzar that you cause to a person. Anyway, למה למלאכת אבל התרתי ולא נכתבה בדעת צריך להדליק הדבר חמנת נתרתי משום צרה דמרה איתה, צרה דידי איתה, right? Because when you're not helping, the Ritva explains כוסה, אבל אבידה לצרה דמרה איתה וצרה דידה לאיתה אימה לא. ויש מן אבידה משום דלאיתה למרה בהדה. If you don't think about the lost item, one will say that due to the fact that its owner is not with it to care for it. 31b, אבל הני תרתי דאיתה למרה בהדה אימה לה צריכה. But when it's come to these two mitzvot of prika and te'ina, of unloading and loading, so Rashi explained that dichtiv imo ema yachzor achrei bnei adam v'yizkor. Zot omeret, meaning that the owner, it's written imo, azov ta'azov imo, akem takim imo, the owner of the animal is present there with the animal, so he can hire people to help him. So Tosfot said ואף על גב, and even though דמרבינן לעיל אין בעלים עמו, היינו שהוא זקן או חולה. So earlier we said that if the person is elderly or sick, ונדע לא יכול לעזור, that even physically תוספות זה, he cannot be of assistance, יכול לזכור פועלים. So he can call upon employees, labor, that comes out and help him. Aimalo. So you may think that one who sees it doesn't have the obligation to help. And Ritva add to that, and he said that when it's come to loading and unloading, the Be'alim, the owner, is aware of the whereabouts of his animal and is just, in a way, easily can arrange some aid or some assistance to that. So when it's come to a lost item, the Ritva aid, that's a different story because there's no one there then the finder of the one who discovered that can take care of that. So tzricha, so as a result, it's necessary for our Torah to write both, meaning unload and load. Now the Gemara will turn to the point of explanation of those verses that they contain a kefel lashon, a double of expression. So for example, someone who murdered, the Torah said in Bamidbar, in Book of Numbers, chapter 35, Mot Yumat Hamakeh, the he that struck him shall be put to death. So, Einli Ela B'mita HaKtuva Bo, which is one of the four mitot bet din, one of the four forms, which is Skila Srifa Hereg Yochenek, this one of the four that the Gemara in Sanhedrin 52b said that's the form of the bet din that can impose. So they said, Minayin she'im ata yachol la'amito b'mita ktuva bo, שאתה רשאי לעמיתו בכל מיטה שאתה ראוי לעמיתו בה. So since you can go and do it in a specific way of מיטה, so you can go ahead and do in any form you wish. Rashi said, והיינו סייב, כגון שהיה בספינה ובורח. So the person is run away on a boat, ואתה יכול לזרוק בו חץ או לטובו. You can throw, in the modern day, it's like a missile, so sinking. Talmud lomar mot yumat mikol makom. So it means, because it's written mot yumat, which means that you must execute him in any case. Haket take, the Torah speaks about Iradidachat, the city in the book of Dvarim, chapter 13, and the entire city worship idols. So the Torah said, Haket taket yoshvei ha'ir ha'il lefi charev. Haket take, you shall strike all the inhabitants of that city. So, אין לי אלא בהכאה הכתובה בהם. You may say that it's apply only to the using sword. That's what different than others who worship idols that deserve stone. מנין שאם אתה יכול להמיתן בהכאה הכתובה בהם שאתה רשאי להכותן בכל הכאה שאתה יכול. Since the Torah permits you to execute them so you can go in any way, Talmud lomar haket take mikol makom, the same mahala, because they said haket take, which means you must execute them in any case. When it's come to a borrower who borrowed money and he didn't pay the time of the scheduled payment, Bet Din sent an agent to confiscate his movable properties. And he the lender hold it as some form of mashkon, some type of a collateral, and therefore he hold it until he return it. So the Gemara medayek, because the pasuk in Dvarim 24 said, "Asher tashiv lo et ha'avo, אלא שמשכנו ברשות בית דין," which means that the agent of the beit din, he is the one who took the collateral from the borrower and gave it to the lender. משכנו שלא ברשות בית דין מניין, תלמוד לומר אשר תשיב מכל מקום, the same מהלך, that even if the lender took collateral without the sanction of the beit din, because the Torah repeated and said אשר תשיב, so it must return it in any case. חבול תחבול. So here the Torah speaks about חבול תחבול אשר תשיב. It's a return of the you take a collateral of your neighbor garment, you shall restore it to him until the sunset. אלא שמשכנו ברשות, meaning he get the permission from the beit din. משכנו שלא ברשות מניין, תלמוד לומר חבול תחבול מכל מקום. Must return it in any case. So נתיבות המשפט, we don't have time, but נתיבות המשפט have a big מהלך based on its Gemara if Reuven make business arrangement with Shimon. And it said that half is going to be deposit and half is going to be a loan. And all of a sudden, he get bankrupt. He lost, he is bankrupt. So the question is, what do? You can basically execute what? The loan. But without the beit din is problematic. What do you do with the deposit? Can you take everything or you can take only half? Because it's divided, half deposit and half a loan. Anyway, it's a big malach in נתיבות המשפט based on our Gemara. Why you need to have two psukim when it's come to return a collateral? חל דכסות יום וחל דכסות לילה. One applied to the garment that worn by the day and one by the night. That's the more later one you see on page 114b expanded that. כי פתוח תפתח את ידך לו, מצוות צדקה, open your hands for him. So it means אין לי אלא עניי עירך, לעניי עיר אחרת מניין. That's applied to the local indigent. But how do you know that you need to give tzedakah also to poor people from other city? תלמוד לומר פתוח תפתח מכל מקום, because the Torah repeats and said פתוח תפתח, it means that you give to charity to all those indigent in any case. So the Pnei Menachem, the former Rebbe, that they have a privilege to have a beautiful Kamma, and also the Binchat Yitzchak, the late Diane Weiss that wrote for me a beautiful Kamma. They have both a responsa, how you treated Aniyei Yerushalayim, the poor people in Yerushalayim. Is that considering Aniyei Yircha or not considering Aniyei Yircha? Anyway, let's just finish the sugya. נתון תיתן, אין לי אלא מתנה מרובה, מתנה מועטת מניין. תלמוד לומר, נתון תיתן מכל מקום. Can give even if in the small part. הענק תעניק לו, that's עבד עברי, אלא שנתברך הבית בגללו, כי יוסף הצדיק הוא עבד נתועה. מעניקים, מניין שלא נתברך הבית בגללו, that you need to give him when he emancipate. תלמוד לומר, הענק תעניק מכל מקום. Torah said it twice, הענק תעניק. So it means that you must furnish him with gifts in any case. ולרבי אלעזר בן עזריה לעצמו דולן קידושין 17b, נתברך הבית בגללו, מעניקים לו. לא נתברך הבית בגללו, אין מעניקים לו, למה לי? תעניק למה לי? זה דיברה תורה בלשון בני אדם. Torah speaking language of people. Tosfot here explained, ואם תאמר בחילת לו כולל הדרשות לאל ועל ידי ראשון משנן דמן להיד ולא מסע מקראי. So in short, the whole idea is that Rabbi Elazar ben Azar hold that there's nothing extraordinary about about it, is then nothing may be derived from it. So basically, in the Parsha we read that the whole house of Potiphar was blessed because of Yosef. But here the Chidush is that even if it's not, the Pele Yoetz brings this Gemara, and you have a discussion when someone have alva'a mutnet, conditional loan, meaning if you can't return it, it's a gift for you. Is that about tokef? Is that something that is feasible by our Jewish law based on this Gemara? Anyway, הבאת אביתנו אלה שאין לו. ולא רוצה להתפרנס. He doesn't want to have a gift, doesn't want to get money from charity fund. מרחמנה, תן לו דרך הלוואה. יש לו ואינו רוצה להתפרנס. The person is extremely miser, right? He's greedy. He has, but he rather, he willing to eat only for money of others, and if he doesn't get money from others, he rather starve. מנין תלמוד לומר תעביתנו מכל מקום. That's the chidush. You have to help him. תעביתנו must grant him a loan in any case. ולרבי שמעון דאמר, יש לו ואינו רוצה להתפרנס, such a miser, אין נזקקים לו, תעביתנו למה לי? Same one, דיברה תורה כלשון בני אדם, Torah speaking language of people, and nothing may be derived from it. So the late Minchat Yitzchak, the discussion with Rabbi Moshe Weisblum, based on the Minchat Chinuch, you see it also in the written of Shlomo Kluger, based on our sugya, if someone is a mitabed, right? So mitabed, in the form work of Jewish law and suicidal, you don't have the chiyuv la'atzil, you don't have the obligation to say. So, maybe he asks, how you treated Aved Amidat? Aved Amidat is like in our sugya, that's Rav Shlomo Kluger, famous question. You have here a person who's such a kamtzan, such a tremendously greedy, doesn't want to take anything for himself, all from others. So there is a malach, Rabbi Shlomo Kluger said, based on our sugya, that the limud is from ha'avet, that you basically lend him, and after he is no longer among the living, you can take the loan, the money that you own, from his heir, from the Yorshim.